So let's talk about a technology that feels like it's been pulled straight out of a sci-fi movie. But guess what? It's real and it's happening right now. And it brings up this huge question. Should we actually be able to design our future children? Let's dive in. Just imagine this for a second. What if, before a pregnancy even starts, you could look at a group of embryos and pick the one with the lowest chance of disease, or the one with the best shot at being intelligent, or maybe even select for certain looks? I mean, that is the incredible and, yeah, incredibly controversial promise of this whole new world of reproductive tech. The technology that makes this all possible is called PGT-P. Now, the most important thing to get straight here is that we're not talking about gene editing like with CRISPR. No, this isn't about changing genes, it's about choosing them. It uses these super complex algorithms to scan an IVF embryo's DNA and then spits out a risk score for all sorts of things that are influenced by tons of genes, from heart disease risk to how tall you might be. So that's the big idea, right? The promise. But like with so many of these brand new technologies, there's this massive gap between what's being marketed and what the science can actually deliver. Let's break down that disconnect.
The way this is sold to people, well, it's basically marketed as a way to get a winning ticket in the genetic lottery. The pitch is super simple and honestly pretty tempting. You can give your kid the absolute best start in life, kind of stacking the deck in their favor by picking for health and other traits before they're even born.
But almost as soon as this technology appeared, the scientific community slammed on the brakes hard. Researchers who've actually dug into the data have come to a completely different conclusion. Many are saying, flat out, that the whole thing is highly doubtful and just not ready for prime time. So why are they so skeptical? Well, it boils down to a few major issues. First off, these risk scores, they're mostly based on data from people with European ancestry. So how accurate are they for anyone else? That's a huge question mark. Second, scientists are pointing out that taking data from millions of people and trying to apply it to like 5 embryos from one couple is just statistically wonky. Plus, these scores totally ignore the huge role that your environment and your lifestyle play in your health. And on top of all that, you have to remember that the IVF process itself and the biopsy you need to test the embryo, they come with their own medical risks. Okay, so with all these red flags from scientists, you have to wonder who would actually use this stuff. Well, the source material we're looking at says to really get the appeal, you have to look past the science and into specific cultures. And it points us right to Singapore. This one number, 1.05, it tells you so much. With one of the lowest fertility rates on the entire planet, there is an unbelievable amount of focus on the children that families do have. And that pressure creates this perfect environment where a technology that promises a better, more successful child might seem really appealing. The source points to 5 specific cultural drivers that could create a perfect storm. So in many East Asian societies, the idea of eugenics doesn't have the same dark history it does in the West. It was often seen as a way to improve the nation. You also have intense pressure to conform, a super competitive tiger parenting culture, and this huge expectation for successful parents to have successful kids. You throw in some very specific beauty standards, and suddenly you can see why embryo selection might take off in a big way. So, given this very real potential for the technology to be adopted really fast, maybe without enough criticism, well, the authors of the paper argue that we can't just let it run wild. They're proposing a clear set of 4 essential safeguards to handle it responsibly. The whole goal here is to stop a slippery slope, to prevent a tool that was maybe intended to stop disease from sliding into becoming this consumer product for genetic enhancement. These rules are basically designed to be firm guardrails, not just to protect patients, but really to protect all of society. Okay, so here are the 4 big rules they're proposing. First, and this is the big one, restrict this technology only to preventing serious diseases. No enhancement, period. Second, don't give patients the raw DNA data, because they could use it for other things you're trying to ban. Third, make people prove there's a family history of a disease before you even let them test for it. And fourth, make detailed genetic counseling mandatory so people truly understand what this can, and more importantly, can't do. And the thinking behind these rules is pretty powerful when you dig in. Limiting it to disease stops us from creating a genetic divide, a world of genetic haves and have-nots. It also helps us avoid what one researcher called the yesterday's child problem, where today's must-have genetic enhancement is obsolete tomorrow. And blocking access to the raw data, that's just practical. It stops people from taking that data to a clinic in a country with fewer rules to secretly select for sex or some other trait. When you zoom out, you realize this whole debate isn't just about one piece of tech. It's really about a much bigger conversation we need to have about the kind of future we actually want to build. And at the absolute core of this global debate is this fundamental difference in philosophy, which this quote just nails. Is the most important thing individual liberty, the freedom to make your own choices about having a family? Or is it the overall good of society? Different cultures answer that question in very different ways, and that's going to lead to very different sets of rules. In the end, as this technology gets better and more common, every single society is going to have to figure out where it draws the line. The choices we all make in the next few years could literally shape what humanity looks like for generations. So, how do we find that balance between what one person wants and what's good for all of us? That's really the question on the table.